Hello, this is Coach Matt from Coach Matt's Online Chess Academy. And today I get the honor of showing you guys a very exciting chess game known as the Opera game in chess. This is one of the most famous chess games of all time. In fact, if you do research on this game, you will see many videos about its history and its origins. But today, I want to use this video to teach an understanding of development. Now, development is an important idea in chess. It allows every single one of your pieces to come out from their original positions to better squares. That's what development is. So when you're playing chess, the best players will not just bring out one piece, they'll bring out every one of their pieces out to squares and help their position get better. Once they get the attack that they want and the pieces out in the squares that they want, then their attack is going to be stronger. In this game, we started off with the move e4. Black responded with e5, a very classical defense, and white played the knight out to f3, which is now attacking this pawn. Black decided to play the move pawn d6, known as the Philidor's defense. Here, the knight is attacking e5, and the pawn on d6 is defending. White played d4, attacking the center, and black played bishop out to g4, pinning the knight to the queen. This is known as a relative pin, because I could make a move with the knight if I really wanted to, but this would, of course, lead to a position where my queen would be in jeopardy. White takes the pawn, black captures the knight, white takes back with the queen, and the pawn captures. And here, white plays bishop to c4. Now, this is a very nice move because it threatens a checkmate on the f7 square with the queen and the bishop both converging on that particular point. And this square is only being guarded by the king. So if the queen is the one that captures it, it would be a checkmate. So black decides to play knight f6 to develop a piece and block that attack. And white makes a really clever move here. He plays queen to b3. And this is known as a double attack. The queen is attacking the pawn here on b7, and it's also forming a battery. And a battery is when two pieces move in the same direction, with the queen and the bishop both aiming at the f7 square. Now, this position is very interesting because there's two different attacks, and it seems unlikely that black can defend both on one move. So let's take a look at the board and come up with which threat is stronger, the bishop taking f7 or the pawn being captured on b7. Okay, if you'd like more time, hopefully you can pause the video at this point. But the answer of this is the bishop on f7 is the stronger threat. Let me demonstrate this to you by showing what would happen if black made a move that dealt with neither threat, something like rook over to g8. This move would allow, of course, bishop takes the pawn with check, attacking the king, and is protected by the queen. So the king can either go to e7 or to d7. If he goes to either of those squares, the next move would be queen to e6, which is checkmate. And in this situation, there's no way that black can get out of this situation. It is checkmate, and white wins the game. If we back up here a little bit, and we take a look at the idea of queen takes the pawn on b7, you could argue, Coach Matt, I'm going to win this rook. But clearly, the argument isn't going to be as strong as getting checkmate. This is how black has to realize which threat is stronger. So if we back up in the game here, and now we realize what really happened, is black decided to deal with the threat on f7 because it's the one that deals with checkmate. He played queen e7. So now, many of you are saying, well, Coach Matt, what if the queen does take the pawn now? Well, he could do that. But if he did take the pawn now, he doesn't actually win the rook. Black has a way of forcing the queens to trade by playing queen b4, which is defended by the bishop, and now checks the king and also attacks the queen. So if white wants to defend and captures the queen here, white in this situation is going to see his queen fall to the bishop. When the pawn attacks the bishop retreats, and white is clearly up a pawn now. That could have happened in the game, but white was more concerned with something else. White wanted to go for development, and white decided to bring out his knight that's on b1 that's kind of sleeping here, not active at all, and bring it out to c3. Now this knight not only threatens to jump into squares like d5 and squares like b5, but the knight also defends the pawn on e4 from this knight at f6 that is attacking it. Black continues here, and Black can develop some pieces himself, but he decides to save the pawn on b7 by playing pawn forward to c6. Once this move happens, the queen on e7 is now able to guard the pawn on b7. In this situation now, it's going to be White's turn. White has one minor piece remaining that has not been developed on the board, and that is the bishop here on c1. White naturally wants to get all his pieces out and developed, so he plays the move bishop to g5, which creates what's called a relative pin, pinning the knight to the queen. Black could develop or could deal with this threat, but decides to play b5, attacking the bishop on c4. Now, after this move happens here, many are saying, well, Coach Matt, aren't you going to save the bishop somewhere? Well, you could, but here, Black's development is so far behind White's, with so few pieces developed, that White is actually able to sacrifice his knight here. And then when the pawn recaptures, the bishop can then take, checking the king. And now, if the knight tries to block, the bishop would take the queen. If the queen tries to block, the bishop would take him. So he blocks with the knight as he wants to preserve his ability to castle. Once his king moves, he cannot castle anymore. Here it's going to be the turn now of White. And White decides to make a very, very nice move. He does queenside castle. By doing this technique, he now puts the king in defense by these pawns on b2 and c2. And he also allows his rook to be active and attack the knight on d7. Now, this knight looks well defended by the queen and the knight, but is it really being guarded? Let's take a look at it. Let's assume that Black makes another move that doesn't deal with this issue, like rook g8. If he made a move like this here, White could just take the knight for free. If Black tries to take with the queen, the bishop would take him. If the knight tries to take him, the bishop on g5 would take the queen. So he has no defense at all, and a free piece is won by White. This is why Black has to guard this knight. Well, he can defend it by castling as well. If he were to do this, for example, he would unfortunately be put in a situation where White can checkmate the king in just 2 moves. If you look at the board right now, take some thought and figure out what the checkmate in 2 is. Okay, if you need more time, please pause the video. But the answer here is bishop a6 check. That checks the king, and with the queen controlling all of these squares, the king must move up to c7, and now the queen is going to slide up to b7 and checkmate. As you can see, every single square is now covered in the board, including the square on d6, which is guarded by the rook, and the bishop does protect the queen. It is checkmate, and White wins the game. This forces Black to defend with his rook on d8. Well, now it's White's turn. White has only one rook remaining that hasn't been developed. Look at what a great job White did developing all of his pieces. Every single piece is involved in some way, doing something really good, except for this rook here on h1. Now you could bring your rook to e1, but White decides to go for rook takes knight. By doing this, he realizes the only capture back that is safe would obviously be for the rook to take back. And now the rook can slide over to d1 and attack the rook yet again. And now every single one of White's pieces has been developed correctly and are out on the board on good positions. When you develop all your pieces, you're getting close to formulating the best attack you possibly can. Well, Black realized something here. He realized that if this queen were to trade for this queen, that would help him quite a bit. He would then be in a situation where his king would have more space to move. So he goes for a queen trade of queen to e6. Now, some of you might say, well, Coach Matt, trading queens is good. You take the queen off the board. Well, look at what's going on right now in this position. White has 1, 2, 3, 4 pieces, and Black has actually 5 right now. And in fact, if you traded the bishops for the rooks, and if you traded the queens for the queens, And if you traded this bishop for the knight, and you traded this rook for this rook, black would only have one bishop remaining, and white would have no pieces. And this bishop would run around the board, capturing all of these pawns, and it would give black a good chance to win the game. So this is definitely something that white wants to avoid. White decides to play bishop takes d7 check. This move not only attacks the king, but also attacks the queen. If the king moves somewhere, then the bishop would capture the queen. So black's knight decides to take. With this in mind, white comes up with a very, very exciting move that forces a checkmate in just 2 moves. Take a look at this position. Make a guess what white plays next. Okay, if you need more time, please pause the video. But the correct answer here is queen to b8 check. This is such an incredible move because it looks like it gives away the queen for free. But actually, notice the bishop on g5 plays an important role here because it defends all the dark squares around the king. This actually forces black to take the queen. There's no other move he can make. And when he captures the queen, this opens up the d file for the rook to come on down and perform a checkmate. Here the bishop is now defending the rook, and the rook is now checking the king, and there's nowhere to escape. Game over. Now, as some of you are aware, checkmate overrules everything. So even though black has a queen and he's got an extra knight here up, if he goes to the scores table at a chess tournament and says something along the lines of, I lost the game, but I had an extra queen up, does he get extra points? Well, no. So keep in mind that checkmate is the deciding factor of every game, and capturing material can only help you win, but checkmate is the way to win. I hope you enjoyed this lesson. For those of you interested in taking chess lessons online with me, please remember that you can become a great player. All it takes is hard work, patience, and persistence. Please contact me for my help by email at chess.coach.matt@gmail.com.